Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Enough.
Welcome
It's been
back,
a
everyone.
yeah, it's been a while, or at least I don't think it's been that long. It's been an extra week, so it's been 2 weeks, but it just feels like we've been away from the mics for so long. I'm happy to get back into it, and hope you are too, Peggy. I think it's gonna be a fun conversation today.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I know this is coming out tomorrow, not today, but today is Nico's name day for St. Nicholas. So, Chronia Pala, many years to you. And today we're going to be talking about your patron saint. So, I
Yeah,
am
how
very
timely
excited.
is that?
I mean, I want to hear what you have to say about, someone who lived so long ago and yet like must serve in some ways as an inspiration to you in your life. Maybe more directly than me, who St. Nicholas is not my patron saint, but
Right, for sure.
always on my mind this time of year. So
For sure. Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for those wishes. But yeah, so Saint Nicholas is such a champion saint of our church. He's one of the most famous saints, really. Me and Peggy were talking about this before we hit record, but what a saint he is. And I'll kind of talk about my personal stories with Saint Nick after the fact that after we kind of go over this. But man, he lived in really a time where the church wasn't a structure like as structured, really or really structured at all. Right now we live in such a lucky time where, we have these very clear or mostly clear patriarchates and jurisdictions that we can, look to for just kind of overall did it a what's the word I'm looking for?
structure,
Structure.
guidance.
Yeah, structure. I was looking for a different word, so not to use structure over and over again, but we're going to use it. Yes, overall structure. But so he lived in the fourth century, and he was actually present in the first council of Nicaea, which is super cool. And he was there with just amazing other saints. Me and Peggy, like again, we were just talking about before this, all like these holy, big name saints of our church, like Saint John Chrysostom. I think Basil the Great was there. I could be wrong on that. Just kind of going off the top of my head, but man, oh man. And I really love the story of him at the first council. I think it's a bit funny, and there's some pretty good memes out there. But
Definitely.
basically, so he was at the council, and for those of you who don't know, the first council was defending the heresy of Arianism, which was basically uh, a false teaching of who Christ as the person was. So if you want to look more into that, I encourage you to look into it because I think it's super important to know kind of the history of our church and why these councils were called. But at one point in the council, Saint Nicholas was so like mad, but not really mad because it was out of so much love he had for God and the faith that he struck Arius, the heretic, um, and punched him. And all the bishops were like, "What do we do?" Because you're as a bishop, I believe I was reading. There's like a canon that if you strike someone, you're supposed to be like stripped of your position. But everyone loves Saint Nick; he was such a holy guy, and they're like, "What do we do?" And so, anyways, he ended up being um, defrocked or deposed of his bishop as a and I, he wasn't thrown in jail, was he? He was put into a room or something while they like were trying to figure it out, I think, or I could be making that up. But what's super, yeah, right? Am I on the right track there?
I think you are.
All right. I'll keep talking then. Um, but yeah, and then I think that there's a really funny meme. It's like uh, deck a heretic full of folly, kind of like deck the halls with bells of jolly. I always find that every year and send it to my dad and get a good laugh out of it. But anyways, that's a good meme about that. But so after this kind of took place, the bishops were trying to figure out what to do with them, and uh, a few of the bishops of the councils had visions of, I think, the Theotokos or other god saying, he's one of the good ones, bring him back. And St. Nicholas himself, while he was in this room alone, awaiting the judgment of the bishops, basically, was visited by Christ himself in the Panagia, and Christ gave him a gospel, and the Panagia brought him an omophorion. It's one of the key vestments of the bishop to reinstate his episcopacy, which is one of the coolest things. I really didn't learn that story till recently. Um, I found an icon at Holy Cross while I was up at Crossroad in their bookstore, and it was a picture of this Christ on one side with the gospel and the Panagia on the other with the garment of the bishop. And I was like, what does that mean? And it wasn't until shortly after that I figured out, and I was like, that is just so cool, because I knew that he had punched Arius. I knew that he was kind of looked down upon for a little bit of time there, but I didn't really know that. But man, that's one of my favorite stories about Saint Nicholas, and there's so many more. He was such a great almsgiver. He's the patron saint of like seems like everything.
I know.
Sailors. What else is it? It's right in here. what else is the patron saint of?
I mean, seafarer, not just sailors, but travelers in
Right,
general,
travelers.
those kind of stuck in storms.
Uh-huh. Sure, I was just talking about this earlier. I don't know why I forgot. Funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, he's like just wonderful, wonderful things. And in fact, today I was scrolling through Instagram and I found this really cool icon of him at sea, and it was under it in the bio there was a story of a sailor who didn't really know, wasn't really a faithful man, but he was the captain of the ship and got stuck in this terrible storm, and he remembered what his mom used to say. He's like, pray to God, pray for he had mercy. And so he took that to heart right then and prayed to God. And he had a vision of Saint Nicholas like walking around the boat, blessing the boat, with both hands like the bishop does. And it wasn't until he found a church, he went to go light a candle to thank God, and it was a picture of Saint Nicholas, and he was like, that's the guy who is with me. And there's just
Wow.
so many stories like that. He's such a cool bishop and saint of the church.
Yeah, it's just really awesome to hear his experience and the stories passed down. Because one of the things we don't have from St. Nicholas is a lot of his, direct quotes and things like that. When we hear of the early church fathers and we have their writings and
Right.
things like that, but from St. Nicholas, we have a lot of his example and what has been passed down to us, because the way that he conducted himself was so significant that others took note. And I mean, his story has been passed down for so long that he's considered one of the most famous and well-known saints. I mean, I can think about how many Nicholases and Nikos I know
Hmm.
in the Orthodox world, and there's a lot of them.
Of
And
course.
it's pretty awesome to think about his legacy, which really he did all that he did through Christ, obviously, and it's amazing to see someone like that really stick up for his faith in the face of adversaries. He's a great example for just how we should live our lives, on a day-to-day basis. But like you were saying earlier, just to imagine him at this council when there was no structure at all at first. I mean, they were coming up with things like the creed that we say today. I mean, I can't even imagine being in a room with all those people having these debates and discussions. But he was really noted for bringing in, I know it says in his Apolitikion, he was a model of faith and the image of gentleness. And I think that's really important to remember. I mean, it also says he was a master of temperance. And these are
Right.
great virtues that we're always called to remember, and to think that, in that action of really love for Christ, as we say, when he, you know, punched Darius or slapped him, we still have what he is known for is this gentleness, which I think is also probably one of the reasons why it was so shocking, that
Right.
event at the council, because he's so known for these other virtues. So it's important to keep, I think, this story that we have of him in our minds.
For sure. And I really liked what you said. You were talking about how all the early church fathers are known for their writings. I mean, you just, Basil Gray, John Chrysostom, they have liturgies with their name in it. And St. Nicholas, he wasn't one of them. And you touched about on this, but he truly is someone whose life we should look to emulate and to take things in his life. And especially for like this nativity season, a lot of his life was spent giving alms and finding the poor families in his flocks and his towns to give money to. And he tried to do this without people knowing. He wasn't taking the credit. He was just a very meek, humble man, as you read from his Apologetico, model of faith, image of gentleness, just beautiful virtues. As you were saying, to just look for it. And that's what you look for in a person day to day. You kind of look for friends, or the just people you look up to. I feel like emulate these things, and how wonderful that the church has such a great saint that does this. One more cool story before I kind of talk about my personal relationship with Saint Nicholas is when he was elected to be a bishop. I'm pretty sure he like had no interest in it. He didn't really want it at all, but I believe the bishop had died in the town, and the priests and bishops came together like, what are we going to do? And God came to one of them and he said, the person who is the first in the church will become your next bishop. His name will be Nicholas. And so St. Nicholas was known for always being the first person in church. And so the next morning, as St. Nicholas' customs was, he was the first one in church, and this bishop got there even earlier to, see who was. And he said, excuse me, like, what is your name? And he said, my name is Nicholas and I'm your servant, and that's just something so beautiful, Even, yeah, I believe he was a priest at that point. Obviously, he was there to serve, as we're all called to serve. And it's just, I
Wow,
love that story. Yeah.
that's an awesome story. I think
Yeah.
just to hear that and to hear what you were saying, just tying everything into the nativity too, and all these virtues, it's something that we look for in other people, but it's also something that we're drawn towards. I don't know, like
Right.
when I have these people in my life who I notice are so quiet and humble, and yet they're doing these great things like almsgiving and giving their life for God and the church. It's something that you notice without them being boastful about it. You notice it through
Right.
their actions. And I mean, as we go into the nativity season with gift giving and things like that, we can remember St. Nicholas and some of his original gifts, not just to other people, but to the church as a whole, which I think is so important.
Yeah. And just as you were saying that, it kind of just pops in mind. And those people, and obviously Nicholas, these were people that were truly preaching the gospels without words, like we're all called to do, you know? And I've always loved that line. And this is just, it's someone living that. But kind of moving forward, personally, I feel like I haven't had that much of like a connection with St. Nicholas throughout my life. And it wasn't really until recently where I started praying to him more. And I like, I haven't had any miraculous visions or, things like, these people like Tess, him rescuing them in the sea. But I felt more and more just little things reminding me of St. Nicholas, or I'll go into a church and there'll just be a beautiful icon. And I'm like, wow, St. Nicholas. And he started to become everywhere in my life recently. And I think that's super cool, especially because I've been trying to like develop, and pray more to St. Nicholas and help him intercede because he is my patron saint. I carry his name. And I truly look to emulate his life because it is such a life that one should. And throughout, these last couple of months, I've really been trying to pray hard to him. And, through God's will, I've seen just little slivers of like, oh, thank you, St. Nick, or oh,
Yeah,
that surely was from God. And thank you. And he's, praying to him is obviously God, of course, but has given me so much clarity and a lot of things just going in my life because college is a confusing time. There's so much going on. You're running to point A to point B, and just, to have someone, is looking out for you from above is truly a beautiful thing. And I encourage all of you to not only to pray to St. Nicholas, but to start, if you haven't, praying to your patron saints because you carry their name. And, when you're baptized after them. And it's a beautiful relationship that you can kindle and work towards.
absolutely. Our patron saints are definitely people who we can turn to. And when we have the stories of their lives, we can see, the little nuggets of wisdom and faith that we can implement even in little ways in our life. And in the nativity season with St. Nicholas, even though he's not all of our patron saints necessarily, we always hear about Santa Claus and jolly old St. Nick. And I think maybe something we can do is when we hear Santa Claus or something, just remember like, thank you, St. Nicholas. Thank you, God. Take a tiny little prayer in there. I mean, I don't think it
Right.
hurts to remember where kind of our modern remembrance or interpretations of old times and saints who, even though they lived thousands of years ago, are still so relevant in our lives today.
Oh, it's so relevant. That kind of struck a funny story with what you were saying. But I remember when I was a little kid, we were watching Veggie Tales, and I think we were watching Veggie Tales at school, which doesn't really seem right, but I think we were. And it was like it was the Christmas episode, and it was like all about Saint Nick, and all of these people I remember asking later on, they're like, "Oh, Saint Nick was a real guy," and all of this, and it's like those little things, they're spread out through our like American culture and just kind of the world culture of the world, but a lot of them do have roots to Christianity and the truth of the church. And like you were saying, just remembering that when you hear Santa Claus, oh, Saint Nick, think Saint Nick, say a little prayer to God, say a little prayer to Saint Nick. Wow, I can't talk. It's been a long day, but it's just those little things that if you connect them to God, it makes the spiritual life so much easier because you're always thinking and you're always praying constantly, as St. Paul calls us to, pray without ceasing and stuff like that. And those are the little ways that you can start to manage doing that, you know?
Absolutely. It's definitely in the little things, the little actions, the little remembrances that in the end build up to an amazing life in Christ. I completely agree with that.
For sure. Yeah. Well, thank you guys all for watching this week. We hope you get something out of it as we've gotten something out of it. I know just this conversation has just kind of brightened my mood. It's already been a great day, but it's just making it so much better. I pray that St. Nicholas, that his intercessions be with all of you today and always. And just, I pray that all of you guys remember that God is enough.
God is enough. See y'all next time.